Catherine?
Okay, John, I just left the courthouse a couple of minutes ago, and the hearing was ongoing. It started, General Flynn entered the courtroom at approximately 10:20 Eastern wearing a navy sort of silver suit, looking very composed, very sort of unemotional, having sort of that sense of military discipline. He told the judge in this case that his intention today is to plead guilty to the charge of lying to federal investigators, in this case FBI agents who are part of the special counsel Russia probe. One of the things that's going on right now is that in order to accept that plea, the judge has to be certain that General Flynn is waiving a number of rights and that he is entering a guilty plea knowingly, with full knowledge, and that he is doing it on his own volition. So we've gone through a number of those procedural steps, but there seem to be three main elements to the charge that's being brought by the government. Number one, that Flynn lied about his conversations in late December with the Russian ambassador and about efforts to encourage the Russians not to react to sanctions that had recently been brought by the outgoing Obama administration. And what we heard in the facts presented by the special counsel's office is that Flynn did exactly the opposite. He encouraged the Russians not to overreact, and then he shared that information with members of the transition team who were at Mar-a-Lago in Florida. So this was something Flynn did, and then he communicated that to other members of the transition team. In addition, there was a conversation where Flynn lied to the FBI about the substance of what was discussed with the Russian ambassador over a UN sanction. Now, what's key here, it jumped out at me, is that the government has said, and Flynn has agreed, that a senior member of the transition team, that's how they were identified in court, directed Flynn to reach out to a number of nations on this issue, including Russia. And one of the complaints of the Obama administration was that the Trump transition team was kind of getting ahead of its skis and acting like they were the government in power when there can only be one administration at a time. The third element that was brought by the government was not in the paperwork released earlier today, and it has to do with Flynn's work on behalf of foreign governments. And the government maintains that in March of 2017, so just earlier this year, when he filed his paperwork retroactively for work on behalf of Turkey, that Flynn was misleading in that paperwork and was not forthcoming to the degree to which Turkey was really overseeing the entire project and calling the shots on the project that Flynn had originally said was about encouraging better business relationships between the United States and Turkey. So, in a nutshell, Flynn has entered the court behind me today. He has told the judge his intention is to plead guilty. Judge is taking him through a number of procedural steps to make sure he understands that he's waiving critical constitutional rights, including the right to be indicted by a grand jury, trial by a jury of his peers, and then also the right to appeal. And we expect this to wrap up in the next few minutes, John.
Is there any indication from anything that's transpired in the courtroom thus far whether he's got some kind of a deal with Robert Mueller's team?
Not from what I've heard so far, but I would say that inside the courtroom, as the proceedings began, Judge Contreras, who is presiding over the hearing today, took out a large yellow envelope that had stamped across the front of it sealed. So these were sealed records. And he told the courtroom that he would have to take a minute to read through all of the items in the sealed records. And this took about 4 to 5 minutes. So it was much more than the 2 pages that was publicly released today. And that could well contain some information giving us more insight as to whether Flynn is cooperating with the special counsel or whether he's been given some kind of concession in exchange for information, John.
Catherine, can I jump in and ask you a question real quick? On that second point that you were making about senior members of the transition team instructing him to reach out to a number of countries, including Russia, is it that he lied about it or that he did that?
He did that. He did not dispute what the government said, that a senior member, not senior members, a senior member
we don't know
of the transition team, transition team. This person was not identified, but directed Flynn to contact a number of nations, including Russia, about this UN vote. So that's
and you're not allowed to do that because there's only one president at a time, was your point.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that was one of the complaints of the Obama administration, is that the Trump transition team was kind of getting ahead of its skis.
Yeah.
And as I believe it was as Susan Rice, the former national security advisor, said, her concern was that there can only be one president and one administration at a time, and that the Trump transition people couldn't be making calls or making the kind of contacts that went to policy issues.
Catherine Herridge, thank you. Terrific.